So yesterday, our church was continuing our exploration, our study of 1 Peter. We started with the intro, 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 2. And as I did my intro last week, we showed how this is Peter writing to a church in exile, a church who's suffering under persecution, not just from Rome, but a church in persecution from their friends, their family. They're just a church who feels like they are living in exile. And Peter's word to them was really interesting because he's telling them, I don't want you to live as orphans. I don't want you to live feeling like you are actually in exile, because there's a reality that's deeper, that goes beyond their experience. See, their suffering, he was telling them, had a purpose. Their suffering is because they are elect. They are chosen by God for this great plan and purpose of Christ's salvation. And that's the idea that he's trying to get across. So this idea that God had a plan, it made this word jump out to me that as I was reading through this. It's this word that's translated foreknowledge. And foreknowledge is a good word. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad word or anything like that, but I think a lot of times systematic theologians have kind of made more of it than Peter's trying to, at least in this way. There's something, it's a lot more simple, I guess, what I'm trying to say, than we seem to make it. So this word foreknowledge in the Greek just means, it's actually where we get our English word prognosis. So think about a doctor, right? You go to the doctor, not feeling well. First he gives you a diagnosis. He says, hey, you've got cancer, you've got some kind of illness. And then he gives you a prognosis. He gives you a plan of action for healing. He said, do this therapy, take these pills, do these drugs, whatever it is. But the thing is, for the doctor, his prognosis is only a probability. You know, you've got a 30%, 50%, 70% chance of survival, and it may not turn out for you. But God's prognosis that Peter is reminding them about is a guarantee. It's a plan. It's something that is guaranteed to bring them healing. They're going to go through a process here, and this process might be painful. This process is going to be difficult, but God's prognosis guarantees the outcome will be in their favor. And so this idea that they feel this suffering, they shouldn't feel abandoned. That's their whole idea, because through Christ, through the work of the Holy Spirit in them, they are going to be sanctified. Their salvation will be made sure. Matter of fact, this word's interesting because it's only used one other time in the entire New Testament. And it goes back to Acts chapter 2, verse 23. And Peter uses this word when he's giving his speech on the day of Pentecost. And he's talking to the Jews that many of them were there, and they were the ones calling out like, crucify Jesus, crucify him, crucify him. And he's saying, you know what? You had meant this for a purpose, but God had a bigger plan. He had a prognosis. He had a plan from the foundation of the world. And so you're not in charge of this destiny. It wasn't like this human-controlled event. This is a God-controlled event. It was a part of his plan, a part of his purpose. So Christ suffered and died so that we might have life. And here again, Peter using it decades later, reminding the church that you are the same part of the same plan, right? You are part of God's prognosis for salvation and sanctification and redemption of the lost who are just desperately in need of this hope of Jesus Christ. And so for me, I guess my big takeaway is that I want to live boldly. I don't want to live in fear of what the world can say, what the world can do to me, whatever they conspire against me to do. I want to live for Christ in a way that I'm not afraid of those risks, because I know that God's plan and purpose for me is greater than those potential sufferings. And I guess I'd hope that that would inspire you this week in some way. Maybe God is calling you to something very specific. Maybe he has challenged you in some way to step out boldly for him. I don't know what that looks like, but I want you to know that your life is a part of God's prognosis.